Hope y'all had a great week. Um, Tonight we're going to be building with my brother Starmel, who is the author of the Righteous Way Trilogy series. Peace, Eric. Peace, peace. Peace, Sharborn. Peace, Melissa. So tonight, y'all, I'm gonna be building with my brother Starmel. He is the author of the Righteous Way Trilogy book series. So we're both very busy, but we've been able to finally coordinate this so that we have an opportunity to just build on our journeys. He's going to give you more insight into the Righteous Way Trilogy series, as well as his personal journey in terms of growth and development. I'm going to take some of your questions in the comment section. And I'm looking forward to it. This is a very positive and progressive brother. And he has a heck of a story. A heck of a story. And then he's also going to talk about some of the things that he's doing right now as well. So he's very inspirational. And it's always good to make sure that we highlight our brothers and sisters who have the type of story that he does and the things that he's doing. Peace, Powerborn. True indeed. And like I mentioned, any questions that you may have, if we have time, you'd definitely be able to add on. But yeah, my brother just tuned in right now, so let me bring him in. Peace, God.
Peace, peace, Almighty.
How you, G?
I'm great, God. I'm great. How are
I
you?
see you. I see you. I see you standing still right now for a brief moment.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's good, G. I'm
Yeah,
glad we have an opportunity to connect. And
definitely.
like I was just talking to the people who've joined already, that wanted to talk a little bit about your journey and growth and development. Um,
Right,
just the idea of the Righteous Way trilogy series, where that actually came from, and why you see that as important to make that contribution, not just to our nation, but just to the whole human family. And then some of the
right,
present things that you're doing right now as well to
right.
add on to our cipher.
Hmm.
So yeah, God. So to begin, um, looking at it from the perspective of your journey in terms of knowledge itself, what would you say was a key moment in your journey that really awakened you to the importance of having knowledge itself?
Well, for me, it started out with reading a lot. I think
Mm,
one of the key uh, things that when we begin studying the knowledge itself, what happened when a person begins to delve into the science of studying themselves and studying history, and how that history applies to them, it triggers more reading, because from the very beginning, as we all know, knowledge is the foundation. It's the first principle of our supreme mathematics, and so when we undertake this great task of studying ourselves, we put knowledge first. And so for me, when going into the science of knowledge itself, uh, it started with supreme mathematics, of course, and then supreme alphabet, and then going into 120 lessons, and sort of, doing a lot of additional research on my own,
Mm-hmm.
to not only substantiate the lessons, but to have an understanding of the lessons and how they play in the greater context, and finding myself in those lessons. And I think that's one of the key things. And so one of the things that I've learned early on is that we definitely have to study. We can't even, for example, take the lessons on face value or at face value. And so that has triggered additional research, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in my course of research, a lot of us tend to read some of the same books, like Autobiography of Malcolm X, for example, and Message to the Black Man. Our Savior Has Arrived. Arrived. Excuse me. A lot of the books that were put out by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Of course, we are, for example, studying 120 lessons. So what that does is that causes us to delve into the subject of knowledge of self as it was seen by Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So that, of course, that triggers us to go ahead and begin, reading a lot more, reading about knowledge of self that's not mentioned in the lessons. And so that kind of like provides more background and context for us to have a more fuller understanding of what it is that we're studying. So in the course of me going through that process, I learned more and more about a common thread that can be, you know, that can be seen throughout the degrees. And one of the things, the concepts that stood out to me a lot was the concept of righteousness, and how we are righteous by nature, or we are divine by nature, we are royal by nature. And so that triggered me to look at righteousness from a standpoint of sort of one of the key components to gaining the knowledge of self. Because now when you're studying yourself, you're studying your nature, and you start learning about, evil and righteousness and what exists within us as original people. And so even in our enlightener, for example, when we sing each and every day in each and every way, I'm going to show and prove and teach the righteous way. So that became a very important part of that study. And that also played a significant role and influence in the title of the Righteous Way book, which eventually became the Righteous Way Trilogy.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now, question, G,
Yeah.
did your social backdrop play a role in that as well? Like, what how old were you? What did your social backdrop look like during that time? What was going on? Like, what type of friends or people were you associated with? Like, what did that look like
Right.
when you were going through this journey?
So for me, this happened around the age of 15. So at
Mm,
15 years old, um, you know, my peers and I, first and foremost, we started off where the knowledge was presented to us in the form of being in the streets. Whether it be, junior high school, hanging out, you learn from your friends and peers. This subject called knowledge itself. Most of us, we learned it from a peer. We learned it from somebody that was older than us, or we learned it from somebody that was in our age bracket that was already exposed to the teachings. And so that person would share the knowledge with us. And then, that's how the influence began. So it started out with me getting that knowledge through my educator at the time was Ron Dewar. So he introduced the teachers to me while in a park in Brookville Park in Queens in the desert. And originally I'm from Medina, Brooklyn, East New York. So at that time, prior to me moving out to Queens, there wasn't much of a framework, or there wasn't a lot of people at the time that were, really advocating knowledge of self, because a lot of people were in the streets and falling a victim to the streets like that. And so I always had family in Queens. I've had uncles and aunts, and my grandparents lived in Queens. So naturally, my family ended up moving to Queens. And that's ultimately where I got the knowledge of self as a teenager. And this was 1995. So in 1995, one of the important things that was taking place back then was, of course, I'm growing up in the era of hip hop. We're coming off of the golden age of hip hop, and now hip hop is undergoing a lot of changes. And so we have a lot of people, different, rappers from different boroughs coming out with music that has the teachings in the music, right? So now this becomes the impetus upon which, we start building and we start hearing more about the knowledge of self. And so it becomes a very popular thing. I grew up listening to Brand Nubian, grew up listening to Poor Righteous Teachers, and then ultimately, Wu-Tang, Nas, Biggie, and so forth and so on. And so one of the things that we do as fans of hip hop is we really listen to the music, right? We don't just listen to the words, but we also catch phrases and ideas that's manifested in the music. And so we're listening in between the lines. And so a lot of this is taking place while I'm growing up as a teenager. And so that, coupled with studying diligently, because that was the mandate, right? To always be studying. And so that became important because it was through the studying and the music that influenced how we built in ciphers, right? And it was inside these ciphers that each of the brothers and the sisters that were a part of that, who had knowledge of self, we would all come together and share our knowledge with each other. And so we dealt with the science of each one teach one. And so this became a very important part of the influence of the teachings of knowledge of self and righteousness, and really being embedded in the culture and learning how to make it walk and talk by learning to build with other people. And so we learned how to apply these teachings, how to apply the basic principles of supreme mathematics. For example, I remember growing up studying supreme mathematics, and in the beginning, it just seemed like words on paper. We would be required to commit to memory these principles and memorize them word for word. This was mandatory. And then it wasn't until we came into a cipher that we really began to delve into the understanding of the teachings by sharing the knowledge with one another. So we're sharing our growth and development, and each person takes an opportunity to manifest how they see, for example, how they see today's supreme mathematics and how that relates to certain lessons within 120. So all of this played a role because this is what was happening. And I understand that, like, if we look at today's generation, they might not have the benefit of having that experience of being in ciphers. Like, a lot of people might become exposed to these teachings through the internet. And so they sort of like didn't have that opportunity to see what it's like to be in a cipher and see the exchange and see the energy and the vibration, of each person in the cipher. And so one of the things I quickly got from being in ciphers is this sense of upliftment, this sense of, enlightenment, this sense of elevated thinking, and awareness and of understanding of the lessons as a result of being in cipher. And as you know, sometimes we can be in a cipher and for hours, right? And so there's so much to take away. And one of the things that I learned to do very early on is if you hear some knowledge in a cipher, not to take it on face value, but to take it back to the lab and do the research, do your homework on that subject. And then, the next time you talk about that subject with someone else, you'll be able to share what you learned. So through that process of sharing and engagement that was the foundation upon which we built our brotherhoods and our sisterhoods.
Mm.
That became the foundation on which we came together and dealt with social equality to a degree where we were able to see the culture in full bloom.
Mm. Now, was that something that you would say was like a total contrast from other things that you were seeing in the community, in the neighborhood?
Oh, definitely, definitely, especially when again, when you're a teenager and teenage things are going on and some of your peers don't have knowledge of self, and most of us, we grew up in disenfranchised communities, poor communities, so we are exposed to crime, we exposed to some of the things that go on in the streets, and so all of this is taking place. And one of the things that the knowledge helped, it helped with giving us a framework through which we can see all of these things. And a lot of times, people get caught up, end up, for example, they dabbling in the streets and also, dabbling with the culture. And unfortunately, some people might end up getting caught up. And as you know, you deal with crime, you're going to end up going to jail. These are one of the things that the father taught brothers to teach, that if you involve yourself in crime, that you definitely will go to jail and so forth and so on. And so some of those things happened to me. I was exposed to that because I grew up as a knucklehead. And so it wasn't until my incarceration that I began to really take a step back and reflect on the principles of the teachings. And then I learned that it is through these teachings and it's through righteousness that we are able to really overcome all of those traps in the hood.
Mm.
And unfortunately for some people, it's too late. Some
Yeah.
people, they learn as they, go through certain trials and tribulations, they go through certain difficulties, and then they realize, oh, these lessons are a foundation for my own salvation. And so it becomes the framework upon which people save themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So as a teenager, for a lot of teenagers, we don't realize this. We don't realize the importance of it until we mature a little bit into the teachings. And so, but for some teenagers, some people, they learn it early on without having to go through that. They learn from the mistakes of others.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it became important because it was at this time where not only are we learning supreme mathematics in 120, but we also going through what we're going through in the streets. And that's an interesting thing because this led to the misconception that this was something that was started, like, for example, in prison, which we all know it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very huge misconception. And that's one of the things that I address in the Righteous Way book, is to clear up that misconception and show and prove that this is something that definitely didn't start in there, but a lot of people that were in there use these teachings to become the framework upon which they're going to save themselves. And so a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people did come out of there and made a successful transition back into society and became productive people. And so I followed that similar path. But when I was dealing with that path, I wanted to make sure that I returned to society as an asset and not a liability. Right? I wanted to be productive. I wanted to contribute something to the struggle. And so it became clear to me that it was important to tell our story, because when we don't tell our own story, other people are left to tell your story for you.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting things about having knowledge of self and having self empowerment is that we must be able to tell our own story. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to share that in a way that shows who we are as a culture, as a nation, in a different light, because it wasn't a lot of information out there that painted us in a proper light or that was factual.
Mm-hmm.
And so it became important to me to become a source of reliable information that people
Mm-hmm.
might have access to our teachings. And
Mm-hmm.
so the righteous way highlights this whole idea of self empowerment, salvation, self mastery through the process, a righteous process of going from knowledge to born, which means the righteous application of the supreme mathematics and the lessons.
Mm. Pardon me for 1 second, God.
Yeah.
Pardon self. Pardon me. My 2-year-old is in here.
Yes, sir.
She messed
Sir.
around and shut the door on herself.
Uh-huh.
But could you hear in the background?
Yes, definitely. Right. Making it known.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
But
right.
to go back to what you were saying when I first met you, G, one of the things that always stood out about you amongst a lot of brothers and sisters that I've met is your level of studiousness.
Mhm.
Like you definitely don't take stuff on face value. You understand the weight of your words and you're very calculated with not only what you articulate but also how you write. Are these qualities that have always been something that in hindsight you've had, or is this something that you developed over time?
Oh, I definitely developed that over time. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes with taking things on face value. Like it took me a while to understand what that meant, to not take anything at face value and to examine everything and to do the knowledge. And I think for me, that's I've learned that that's one of the most overlooked things is the first principle. Before we even get into the lessons, I think that it's important that from the mistakes that I made, I mean, just doing the knowledge. Like, see, we say doing the knowledge, and we say it so freely, so easily, but it takes a level of discipline and mindfulness to be able to hold and reserve judgment. Uh, you know, to first gain a grasp of the facts of whatever it is that you're dealing with, and so that requires a level of discipline to be able to look before we speak, to think before we speak, to listen before we speak. That requires a lot of practice. And I've found that a lot of the mistakes that I've made along the way have been a result of me not yet having the discipline uh to do the knowledge. And so there was a lot of mistakes where I've done the wisdom knowledge plenty of times. I've put my foot in my mouth. I've said things that were extreme and weren't my, I didn't measure my words. But that's okay, right? Because we all make mistakes, and that's this whole thing is a process of growth and development. It took time for me to understand that building, for example, or teaching is not only a science, but it's an art,
Mm, what you mean by that, G?
right? So, we can go ahead and say, well, the duty of a civilized person is to teach, for example, somebody something that they don't know that you might know, right? To teach knowledge and wisdom to all the human families of the planet Earth. Civilized is one having knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, culture, and refinement, and is not a savage in pursuit of happiness. And we quote these lessons, right? And we get to these lessons and we quote them. And oftentimes, in my engagement with other people, I would make a lot of mistakes. And so I would learn that uh, I've learned this also from some of the brothers and sisters that are real dynamic teachers. And this is the importance of studying how people show improve. And it took time. For example, one of the things I learned is that we have four, right? Four ways to show improve something, right? For example, we show improve using science. We show improve using mathematics. We show improve using nature. We show improve using history. One of the things I learned is that for a lot of people, the way that they show improve something or the way they try to substantiate something to someone else is from a historical reference, and they always try to like use history to show improve. But there's many other ways of showing improvement something, right? There's using mathematics, right?
Mm,
It's using science. And so when I say that teaching is not only just a science, it's also an art. And there's a degree of wisdom that comes into play, because when you're teaching somebody something, you really need to be able to sympathize with the person and have the ability, the skill to connect with the person and find out where they're at mentally before you begin divulging lessons, or before you begin sharing your knowledge of the science of everything in life, or civilization, or righteousness that you're trying to share with somebody. And so it takes a degree of skill to be able to, really finesse, right? To be able to have the grace to be able to get your point across, right, without the overkill. And it's and that's where it becomes also art. The science of teaching, as we all know, anybody can look that up and find different principles and different methodologies of teaching, the science of teaching and becoming a teacher, and what it means to be a teacher, and understanding the teacher-student relationship, right? But now the art part, and I think that this is one of the things that the father had very well. He was an automatic hit with the youth, being able to connect with younger people who came from broken families. And so it requires a degree of skill, almost humanitarian, if you will, right? That's a fancy word. People will call it humanitarian, or the arts, right? Being able to communicate and teach in ways that is not only scientific. It has a scientific basis, but it's not only scientific. So that became very, very important. And that's why I say that it provides a balance to be able to deal with it scientifically, and as well as art. When we look at mathematics, or we look at the nature of the universe is scientific. It's mathematical, but it's also a work of art. It's also the beauty that we're able to see in it. And one of the earliest things that we learned is that we deal with wisdom, strength, and beauty. See what I'm saying? So the art part is that beauty part, to find the beauty in the teachings, and to be able to show and prove how beautiful the teachings are compared with all of the other things that are out there that may or may not even be beneficial to our growth and development. And so one of the beautiful things about the teachings is that our mathematics are designed in a way to teach these universal principles in a real simple and plain way. So simple that children or babies can understand it. And what that does is we're able to study them to the degree where almost instantly, right, from the point we start learning about knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, we are connected with our universe, right? We are connected with the nature of the universe and the order of the universe simply by understanding knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So we learned, for example, that knowledge is the foundation. We learned that just as the sun is the foundation to the solar system, the black man is the foundation of his family, right? And then you got the wisdom, which includes the moon, and that being symbolic to the black woman. Okay, and then the babies, and which are the stars, right? So here we have to be able to extract and see the beauty in those sets of degrees, not just the science part of it, but the beauty of it, because in a very easy way, the lessons are connecting us with the universe, right, and connecting us with our nature. And so in a very simple way, without like an entire college course, for example, we start to learn our relationship with the universe. And that's like the beauty that you take away from the wisdom and the strength of the lessons.
True indeed.
Right. So I learned through many, many, many mistakes. And it's okay to make mistakes. But what's not okay is to constantly repeat those mistakes and not learn from them. Yeah. Right. And so, but through those mistakes, learning. Right. And so that's how I was able to develop a process through which I was able to measure my words more, to not take for granted speech, not take for granted how we manifest, because that's where, again, the wisdom and the strength and the beauty also come from how we speak, how we manifest, and then likewise how we act, consistency. Okay, and so what that does is that sets up a thought process, that sets up a way to think about things before you speak on them, before you act on them. And that brings about wisdom out of you. That brings a degree of strength out of you, because it takes strength to be able to hold and reserve judgment to do the knowledge first. Because,
Yeah.
oftentimes we are taught to react to information. We are taught to react to news, which may or may not even be true. It could be, something that is alternate facts. It might not even be actual facts, but we are taught in real subtle ways, indirectly, to react to information rather than study it. And so one of the beautiful things about our teachings is that they allow us to be a little more scientific about how we look at information, and how to filter that information in a way that we are able to take from it what is good, what is right and exact from that information. And that's what I've been able to do with the lessons and with the supreme mathematics, right? Is to be able to take the best part from what it is we study. And I know some people, they study these degrees and they become confused very early on, because they haven't taken the time out to really like do the knowledge to it, study it objectively rather than subjectively. And so what happens is people, start to experience what is called, for example, cognitive dissonance, because they are wrestling with information that they come across that conflicts with something that's a core belief that they've been holding on to probably since childhood.
Yeah, and
Right?
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because what that also implies is when you're on this journey, this inner journey, you're gonna constantly come in contact with people, places, and things within the environment that creates that cognitive dissonance. So, in terms of your journey, what were some of the things outwardly that were challenges for you in terms of staying on this path and your journey of growth and development?
Well, I would say first and foremost, it's being able to interact with family members. I think that's important, right? Because we get this knowledge, and I know a lot of 5%ers, fellow 5%ers, they can attest to this and say that they've experienced the same thing. And when they first came into the knowledge itself, I think one of the challenges, outward challenges, immediately is your family noticing the change in you, right? And being able to deal with that change. For example, if you tell your mom, my name ain't Steven anymore, it's Supreme.
Yeah. So you're
Right?
not talking about, so you just talking about change, period, not even negative or positive, or
Well,
just
no,
change?
on both levels, right? There's some negative and there's some positive. There's both. And
Okay.
so speaking for myself, keeping it on myself, I experience both, right? For example, the negative side is being able to still interact with childhood friends, being able to interact with family members who might perceive the culture in a negative way. And then now you're instantly thrown into this position where now you have to explain new culture to your family, and you got to explain, for example, to mom that you don't eat swine anymore. And a lot of people were face these challenges, and it went through some negative experiences, because it didn't go well, right? Because the degree says that we speak about the teachings and we teach, but the lessons don't talk about how people are going to respond to how you teach, right? And how to deal with that, because a lot of people don't know how to deal with rejection, or a lot of people don't know how to deal with resistance when people are pushing back to what it is that you're presenting to them. And one of the things that we learned early on through studying, for example, the teachings of what the Father went through, and what Elijah Muhammad went through, is that our people are hard-headed, stiff-necked, stubborn, rebellious, and are very hard to teach, right? So we had to learn how to be effective teachers. We had to learn how to show and prove under the gun. We had to, and remember, and I gotta give a shout out, for example, to the early pioneers, because through the oral tradition, through the stories, I've learned that they all went through the same things, you know, and they another outward manifestation, which could be interpreted as positive or negative, is how people in the community are reacting to these 5%ers, right? These new brothers and sisters in the neighborhood that's kicking this new lingo and are often confused with being Muslim, for example. And now you got to constantly correct, right? People. Correcting is something that is more than a science, right? We have to learn the art of correcting. Okay. And so the better that we got at learning how to correct people, how to show improve, the better we were able to deal with people in a wise fashion. And so that had a positive effect, even though it was a negative experience. We were able to transform that negative into a positive by improving how we come across with the teachings, improving how to manifest. And this kind of goes back even into kind of reminds me of the ancient tradition of school. You know, we all get the 7 liberal arts. And so in the teachings of Kemet, for example, which is the oldest known educational system known to man in our present history on this planet Earth, you know, when people went to school or got educated then, they had to learn 7 liberal arts. Among those 7 liberal arts was like geometry, grammar, rhetoric. Rhetoric is something that it was required for you to know how to deal with that before you can rise in the rank to get to that God state, or to get to that, you go from being a neophyte or initiate or what we call a newborn to someone who's considered a master in teachings or a master teacher, or i.e. God, right? And so that's dealing with the supreme state. So a lot of people skipped a lot of steps. They went from the lessons, but they didn't really, you know, like understand the science of grammar, which goes back to wisdom, right? That's today's supreme mathematics. Wisdom, all being born to culture. What does that mean? Right? Wisdom, we always say, is wise words spoken by a wise person, but it's also actions, ways and actions that are manifested by one's good or bad judgment. And of course, here we're talking about good judgment, not bad judgment, because manifestation of bad judgment, we would consider someone to be a fool, trying to play the part of a wise person. And so the wise person learns the mistakes, and the wise person is more reserved with their wisdom because they understand that life and death are in the power of the tongue. And what we manifest out of our mouths can often create an external reality, which becomes what we see around us as a result of what we manifest. And so very early on, the power of wisdom is important, right? How we speak, what we say, and how we say it is very important, especially when we are saying that we are the ones with knowledge of self. We are the ones that know the way. We are the ones that are enlightened. We are the ones that are teaching people knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and culture and refinement. Then we have to monitor how we manifest, right? So I learned through many mistakes by trying to show and prove, for example, at an early age, when I wasn't real strong in my wisdom, how to teach even my own family members. We would get into discussions about, for example, Jesus, right? That's one of the first things that we start talking about with our family members and friends, start talking about Jesus, and we start saying what we learn. And we, you know, one of the things is, you know, we go right into the Bible and how we start exposing and showing people all these contradictions in the Bible. And so that requires a level of skill and art to be able to cite those things, where some people would need time to run and go grab the good book and turn to John and turn to Mark or Matthew or Luke to show people what are they saying. The 5%, we didn't have to do that because it was here.
Yeah.
It was already here. We put that knowledge here, and we were able to manifest that in a way where now people will look at us like, wow, this person knows more about my way of life than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know more about a person's way of life than they do, that actually makes you a more effective teacher.
Yeah. And you know what, G, to add on to what you're saying, one of the differences with me from my younger ages and into my older ages
Yeah.
is in my younger ages, I would have had that type of build with a person,
Mm-hmm.
and it would have been more coming from the place of exposing the flaws and the inconsistencies about that religious
Mm-hmm.
system that they committed their life to.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've gotten older, my approach now is to teach them how to strengthen and edify the principles and values that I know that they're already going to be committed to,
Mm-hmm.
even if they leave this once they leave this conversation. It's less, they're not likely going to take on a whole different worldview now just
Mm-hmm.
because they had this conversation with me.
Right, right.
So I strive to leave them with a little bit more than what they came to me with, so that they could be a better Christian, or they can be a better Muslim, or they can be a better whatever,
Right.
choose, what way of life that they've chosen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I learned that it's like what you were saying in terms of the way in which you share your knowledge. I've taken more of an approach of striving to understand than expect being understood.
Right, right.
Because
Oh,
that
very
equality
important.
is a
Very
lot,
important.
you know?
Very important. Let me tell you, and I think it's important that I share with people out there who may be listening and tuning into this now or later, that I have to really put it out there. Like I never started out like this. The wisdom got sharp, the wisdom got strong by building with my brothers and sisters. Very important, right? Very, very important to have an accountability partner, to have that brother or sister out there that you can build with about certain degrees, and to build about certain principles. And one of the things that we used to put ourselves through examinations and tests, we used to examine each other. That's something that's rare today, I find, is
Yeah.
that and we didn't do it. We did it out of love. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't. We didn't examine each other to tear each other down. We didn't examine each other to. We examined each other to build each other up, because we wanted to make sure that we stayed sharp, and that built brotherhood, that built sisterhood, right? It came from a genuine place.
Could
Uh,
you give an example of what that examination process looked like? Because some
oh
people that's listening, they
yeah.
may not know what that would even look like.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So, for example, the most fundamental is uh, when we would be around each other, or we met somebody for the first time. We introduce ourselves. We said, told the person what our righteous name was, and we would ask each other questions about each other's history, where we're from, how we got exposed to the teachings, and what we got out of the teachings, and where we at mentally. I learned very early on to ask questions of your brothers and sisters, and so I would ask questions such as, before I even get into asking you, for example, how you see today's supreme mathematics. I'm not going to ask you that, right? I'm going to ask you, what's the last good book you read? I'm going to
Mm,
ask you, do you have any brothers and sisters? Are you the
mm.
oldest? Are you the youngest? Are you the middle child? Where are you from? Are you from the South? Are you from the Caribbean? Um, you know, what's your favorite subject in school? I'm going to ask you a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with the lessons before we even
Exactly.
get to how do you see today's supreme mathematics. And unfortunately, sometimes brothers would come straight out, and somebody, like, for example, came around saying their name was so and so, Allah or Earth. And you came around other 5%. You would get examined straight up, and they'll just get right to it. Like, what lessons are you on?
Uh-huh.
We would ask each other, what lessons are you dealing with? Or even go through a process of quoting 120 lessons to be able to make sure that the lessons are right and exact as you have them, right? And
Hmm.
so if there was a discrepancy, if something was wrong, you would discuss it, you would build about it. It wasn't an argument, it wasn't a confrontation. right? It was a friendly, brotherly, or sisterly exchange
Mm-hmm.
of ideas. It was a dialogue
Mm-hmm.
about the teachings.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, unfortunately, for some people, it didn't come out that way, right? For some people, it came out in a more aggressive way. Some people might have done it in a way that repelled people from studying lessons because they didn't want to go through what they thought was getting the third degree.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
The
the
hot
people
seat.
were right, the hot seat and looking at it. But you know, I was one of those people that actually after a while I got to like the hot seat. I was in the hot seat so much, and I didn't, you know, blurted things out the wrong way and couldn't show and prove what I was talking about. Man, I used to get bombed, as we used to say back in the days. You know, but I liked it. I like when my brothers and sisters put me in check because that's what made me sharp.
Mm.
You know, that's what kept me on my toes.
Yeah.
Being correct, I was not afraid of correction. I embraced it.
Mm-hmm.
See
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
And
I
when it's coming
embraced
from
it.
that, when it's coming from that genuine place of love,
Hmm.
that's important,
Right,
But when it's coming from a place of ego and self-importance and a pissing contest,
right.
that's not that's not building healthy relationships with one another. And that's really the foundation of why we're even learning this culture. Because if you don't
Right,
have healthy relationships, the culture is not going to be transmitted from one person to the next. And
right.
if you just walking around with it and you're not establishing those relationships, then it will literally die with you.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to show people this real quick. This is his most recent book right here.
Hmm.
This is the Righteous Way, and this is the third edition,
Part
the
three.
Infinity edition. So Starmel has three books. When you wrote the first book, uh, what made you realize, like, man, I have to put out a second edition of this,
Oh wow.
and then the
So
third edition after the second, like,
after the second, yeah. Actually, it didn't happen in a linear way. It happened really. It was A and B testing type of thing. When I
mm,
first started out, like my goal was to only write one book.
mm,
It was never to write two or three books. That wasn't even my mind. In fact, my goal was to go to college, right? Go back to college after the first book and get my degree because at the time, I only had a GED, right?
mm,
I wanted to get my degree because a lot of people don't know I am pursuing to go to law school. So that was the passion. That was the education degree that I wanted to go after my Juris Doctor degree in law and become an attorney. And I'm still in that pursuit right now. In fact, I'll be applying to
mm,
law school soon. But at the time when I wrote part one, that was really something that I wanted to do to give back to the culture. And if people take the time out to look at part one, there's a lot of different chapters in there where a lot of different essays, and I'm touching on a lot of different topics and trying to like delve in them in a way that gives context and gives understanding and gives people more enough to go out and do their own research and build on it so that they can understand the culture a little more better.
mm,
And so when I did the first book was intended to just be that one book, and then I was going to fall back or at least continue to add on from there. But what happened was the feedback that I got from the first book was so positive, and it was something that even I myself was not able to calculate how that would reach so many people.
mm,
For example, I was not able to calculate the circulation rate. We all know, like, there's, when you're dealing with periodicals and books, there's something called a circulation rate, which is the rate at which somebody reads your material and then passes it on to someone else or
mm,
shares it with someone else. And the circulation rate was very high.
yeah,
And I know that because of the feedback that I got. Like, a lot of people would tell me, yo, I heard about the book. The book is powerful. How can I get a copy? People would inbox me. People would email me. People would see me at parliaments and rallies and build about the book, ask about the book. And I've seen that the feedback was so positive that it became sort of, common sense. That was the next logical step to do a part two. And the interesting thing about it is that the part two came as a result, came out right after we celebrated our 50th anniversary. So part two became the commemoration of our 50th anniversary. And for many people might not be aware of this, they might not have been in tune as to what was going on in the nation at the time, but this was 2016. Pardon myself, 2014. 2014, we celebrated our 50 year from 1964 to 2014 with 50 years. And we had a historical concert at the Apollo, where you had a lot of artists from different eras of hip hop came to perform and came to celebrate with the nation its 50th year anniversary. And that became a very historic landmark event. And one of the things that I wanted to do was come out with part two, and I wanted part two to sort of encapsulate the moment, the experience, the feeling, the vibe of what was taking place around 2014 with this culture, and how the 50th marked a period of which we begin to start to delve into the power of the cipher. And the cipher is in reference to the nation. The cipher is in reference to each one of us individually, as well as collectively tapping into our power. And 2014, or the 50th year of Allah's teachings, marking that point in which we have an opportunity now to examine our power and use it in a different way, use it in a way in which we never used it before. And when you look at what happened after then, 2015, 2016, 2017, moving forward, we start to become impacted by changes in our government, right? With changes in power, transitions in power from, for example, George Bush to Barack Obama to Donald Trump, and now to Joe Biden, where we are now. And we're seeing people like Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris. And a lot of our people are seeing these as signs, right? They're seeing these as something new happening, something that's being ushered in, but without having enough knowledge to be able to interpret it in the right way, so that we can grow and develop and tap into our own power, right? Because, for example, when people saw Michelle Obama and Barack Obama, they seen that as a symbol, as an example of a change, the change has finally come. But really, that was more of a political step, a political change. But really, that is something that we are supposed to take and look at ourselves and look at the individual change that we have to take, that we have to undergo and take to be able to manifest our power. Because when that happened, a lot of people began to shift their focus on just Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, and they're hoping and they're praying and they are wishing that Barack Obama and Michelle Obama solves Black people problems, that they're there for that. But really, the problems that needed to be fixed with us is something that we're supposed to fix, not Michelle Obama, not Barack Obama, not our government, but it's on us. The onus is on us for us to look at this shift in time.
Yeah.
And so now we move forward to what's taking place after that. When we look at when Donald Trump comes into play, and he made it possible, he made it to where, he made it okay for those who were racist to come out in the public, come out of hiding, if you will. And to them, they are manifesting their power. They believe it's their country, and they came out, and look at how they used their power. Look at the example that was set, how they ran up in that U.S. Capitol building. What did they do that the righteous way? No. When 1 million Black men marched on, on the mall in D.C., there was no running up in the U.S. Capitol. We didn't act like savages. We didn't act like barbarians, right? We didn't act like nomads and madmen trying to force change in this world by doing what they did. We were civilized, we were peaceful, we were organized, we were respectful of the US government property. In fact, there were reports that we left it clean when we left the mall in DC in 1995, and again with the Millions Man March, and then the anniversary with Justice or Else, in which I was honored to be a part of, and you know, it was beautiful to go there to the Justice or Else movement, which was the 20th year anniversary of the Million Man March, and be there with so many people. This time the Black families came out, so we didn't just have men, but the women and the children were there with us, and we were there, and we were able to see all our beauty. People from busloads from all over parts of the country, you know, all over the world, people coming in just for that one moment. And you know, if people remember, the message of Honorable Louis Farrakhan then was that we were all there to atone. And then he broke down the word atonement at one. Atone, meaning a sound, a vibration, right? And so he was going into the oneness of God manifested in the people, not in the sky. And so when we look at the Justice or Else movement, here we go again, a 20th year anniversary, we're back, and now the family is out. And, you know, it was beautiful to see, for example, so many brothers and sisters, but especially God's nurse there. And so here we are at another moment in history where we are experiencing these things that force us as a community to delve into our power and to manifest our power differently. More and more people stopped looking towards politics and started looking towards introspection, started looking towards community empowerment, started looking towards supporting Black business. All right. And so we start tuning this power into ourselves. We start tapping in, as they say, into our own power. Yeah. And so part three, the vision for part three, and why it's called the Infinity Edition, because part two was the Golden Jubilee, which is the celebration of the 50th anniversary. The Infinity Edition, right, became something that served as a framework for people, whether they have knowledge of self or not, to tap into their power, to tap into who they are as individuals, and to go into their mind, which is very difficult to do. So it's easy for us to look out and try to find answers that we're looking for about life outside of us. But the righteous way is an inward journey, right? It's about going inside yourself. It's about going in your mind, right? It's about going in your heart, and it's about finding the balance, right, between mind and heart. And if anybody studies what's been taking place, a lot of propaganda has been put out there for the sole purpose of controlling the hearts and the minds of the people. And so I wanted to create something that provided a counterbalance to that, right? Because when growing up, we had people like you know, Malcolm was out, not in our generation, but in that generation, they had Malcolm, and we had Khalid Muhammad, for example, and Farrakhan, and we had other people. You know, we had the father-in-law, the firstborns had the father-in-law. They had people in their lives that provided a balance, that were able to create a framework and a filter by which they were able to interpret the political and socio-economic changes that are taking place, and take that and filter it in a way where we're able to do something for ourselves as a result. Right. And so again, it's all about introspection. It's all about relying on yourself and realizing that there is more power in us than we actually think. We are more wealthy than we actually know. We are more powerful than we actually know. but what we call the 10%, or those in power, or those who are responsible for our oppression, will never, ever, ever, ever teach us that. They will never teach us how powerful we really are. Why? Because they make profit off of our ignorance. They want to use us as a tool and a slave so that they can get rich from our labor. This is why they teach that a mystery God is invisible and can't be seen. So they keep people praying in something that's invisible, as long as they make, especially they make sure that we keep wishing and hoping and spending our money on lotto and waiting on benefit checks and waiting on external things to happen so that we don't rely on our own self-determination and resilience to make the world that we want for ourselves. And so the Infinity Edition brings that together by looking at the power within ourselves. And it, just like as we look at that infinity symbol, which is, you know, how some people say, if you look at the number 8 sideways, you have the infinity symbol. And that infinity symbol, right, is a powerful symbol. It is not only a mathematical expression, but it's a symbol. It symbolizes also energy and the flow of energy that takes place within ourselves, within our nervous system, which comprises of our brain and our entire nervous system throughout our body. It is a symbol for our circulatory system and how we breathe. The inhale and the exhale, right? And so it also represents the zigzag zig. If you look at the infinity symbol, you have twists and turns. And so with the zigzag zig is something that you go through when you're constantly going through this cipher. Because see, time and history is not linear. It moves in a cycle, right? It doesn't move in a straight line. And so we're gonna go through zigzag zig. We're gonna go through positive and negative. We're gonna go through all of these changes. We're gonna go through building and destroying in order to improve self. And that's how we tap into our power, right? And so that's what the whole point of the righteous way is to have a framework to show people that each person has their righteous way. Everybody has to tap into their own righteousness, and each person has their own journey that they must go through to tap into that.
Now to add on to that, some of the people that's in the chat and then people who are viewing this right now, it's important to understand that a lot of times people strive to find 5%er centric books written specifically from members of our nation, and there's not a lot of books that are actually written by 5%ers, gods as well as earths and civilized people. And that's not because people are not qualified as writers. The reason that you don't see a lot of literature from our nation is because of the high level of studiousness and scrutiny that comes along with you putting yourself in that position to be a writer, to articulate our teachings. So the fact that Starmel was able to put out a book that is based upon the standard of righteousness, that tells you not only his level of studiousness, but also the high level of scrutiny that naturally came along with him having the willingness to put this type of content out to the masses of people.
Definitely.
One of the things I wanted to ask G is, there have been some books that are out by people of the 5%, but no one's written a book from the context and from the perspective of the righteous way. What was the reason that you chose that particular approach in terms of providing that type of content, as opposed to just writing a book about maybe the history of the 5% or other different things?
Right. So there's a couple of things, right? You know, one, I had a vision. First and foremost, let me just say that I was inspired by many different writers before me. I was inspired by brothers, not only such as yourself, but brothers like Ilumjad Born Allah B, you know, Supreme Understanding, Sunez Allah. We have some real great writers in this nation. I can't name them all, but I'm gonna tell you something. I had this vision, right? I wanted to produce a book that was, can't forget even, you know, a larger hat. You know, he put out Immortal Birth, and that was a very powerful book for those who understand it. You know, like you can't just be somebody new and pick up Immortal Birth, for example, and really like understand what's going on. You know, you know, that's something that really goes into his experience, you know, out there in Chicago. And this is a book that was based on, you know, in large part his own research and his own experience. And I thought it was a very unique book, and that served as that one, as well as the knowledge of self anthology and all the, you know, shout out and peace to all the gods and nerves that participated in that book as well. A Life of Law, you know, there's so many people, there's so many names, and you know, I didn't just come out of nowhere with oh, I'm going to write a book. No, I was inspired by reading the writings of other gods and earths. But I had a vision. I wanted to produce something that was a work that was totally done by gods and earths. And as much as I would have liked to have more people add on, I knew that that wasn't, you know, possible. So I was able to get some of the best people that I could at the time to work on this project and put it out in a reasonable time. And so, you know, when I look at the righteous way, for example, I thought about not just the 5% or the nation of gods and earths. I thought about the 85%. And this is important because we have a big job, right? We have a big job that really requires us to give up a lot of ourselves and to sacrifice a lot. Oftentimes, the duty to teach, the 85% knowledge and wisdom, is a thankless job. It's almost, you know, we're like the first responders of the hood with the knowledge. We're the first ones on the scene. We were the first ones on the scene, for example, when we do the history, what happened when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Right, and the former mayor of New York City, Mayor Lindsay and his aide Barry Goddard, but Mayor Lindsay wanted to walk through Harlem and apologize to Black people in person, right? But he could not do it without the protection of the 5%ers. So we were on the scene, and this is something that people need to understand: is that, you know, we are sort of the vanguard of our communities, right? So with that in mind, I wanted to put out a book that was written from like a vanguard perspective, a frontline perspective. And I wanted to get right to it. And one of the things that I noticed in our community that's missing is the advocacy for righteous principles. When we look at some of, you know, our most influential, you know, rap artists out there, singers, a lot of our community, we take our example from entertainers or sports athletes. We look at musicians and actors and celebrities as the people that are the role models. But prior to all of that, we had role models in the community. And that for a lot of people, 5%ers were role models. And I wanted to bring that feeling back. I wanted to bring that vibe back in these books. And, you know, I was able to achieve that. I mean, I'm thankful and I'm happy. I'm honored that I've had a lot of people reach out back to me at a time, because they actually confirmed for me, right? I didn't want to be like self-absorbed and say, well, you know, I'm the God. And I know I wrote a powerful book. And I'm going to take the credit for it. No, I sat back because I wanted to see how people responded to the book. So I sat back and studied the response. I paid attention to the feedback. And I appreciate everybody out there that supported the book, everybody that went out and got the book, everybody that had something positive to say about the book, because those comments and those statements, those references, man, you know, motivated me to keep going. So I appreciate everybody that went out there, man, and supported the book and continue to support the book. You know, and I definitely could not have done it without other gods and earths that participated in the book. In part one, there's so many to name, and that's why I do the acknowledgments in the beginning of each book. That some people haven't even seen that yet, because, you know, they just judge the book, or they heard about the book, but they haven't even, like, man, you got to get past the acknowledgement. Do the knowledge to the acknowledgments. Look at who I'm shouting out. Look at who I'm saying peace to. Look at the people that I acknowledge. Look at the people that I dedicate the book to. That's very important before you even get up to chapter 1. Yeah. Again, doing the knowledge is very, very important. But you know what? On the flip side of that, since we're talking about positive and negative, I got to thank even the naysayers. I got to thank the haters. I got to thank the people that criticize me and the book, because that also motivated me to examine that. And I
True
was
indeed.
humble enough to be able to take criticism for the book, because when you're a writer and you put yourself out there, you have to be willing to accept criticism and be open to it, because that's how I was able to grow and develop. If somebody points out something that I might have written that was totally not right and exact, or it was far-fetched, or I went off the deep end, I want you to check me on it. I'm your brother. I'm your brother, right? So check me on it. But know and understand that the book was well researched and it was written in a way to create dialogue, right? Because I noticed that there was a lot of books out there that were written by people who were not 5%ers, and the dialogue that resulted from those works, from those books, wasn't very positive. It wasn't very inspiring. It really wasn't motivational. And people kept taking the worst part out of it. And I said, well, damn, I learned from that. Right. And I wanted to put something out there that had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
Something that would create positive dialogue if people took the time out to do the knowledge.
And I would say too, G, like one of the best parts that I love about the whole entire series is it's because we may not have a lot of our writers that may specifically put out books that are like introductory to our culture. This is the best book to introduce people to what our culture is about. It's very universal. It's written in a very easy to understand way, and it reaches everybody where they're actually at. You could be a person that never even heard of what a 5%er is before and pick up this book and get a good sound understanding about what a 5%er is.
That's right.
So that when they come in contact with one, they will have some sense and expectations of what our principles and values are. Like you were saying, there's some people who are not even a part of our nation or don't even live our culture, and they may write something because they go to school and they're coming from some type of academic approach or from various different perspectives, and it really skews who we actually are.
Right.
And as a writer myself, I find myself always striving to put out content to correct some of these errors that people made simply because they just didn't even ask us.
Right.
They've never been around us, but yet they feel like there's some type of authority on articulating who we are to the world. So I appreciate the fact that you took on that initiative to say, you know what? I have to create something as a standard so that if anybody wants to learn about this, this is the way you need to be introduced to our culture. This is the way. Not that, not this way, not all of this. This is the introduction right here.
And God, let me just say, I appreciate you too, God, because you were part of that inspiration. I did not do it by myself. I am because we are. Let me say that again. I am because we are. And that's very important, right? No man is an island unto himself. Everything is interconnected. And when I'm studying the universe, I'm studying myself. When I'm studying myself, I'm studying the universe. But you know what else? I'm also studying us, because we are of the universe, right? And that's very important. So it's I try not to look at only myself, but I try to look at myself as a part of the universal scheme of things. The bigger picture, right? I am a star among many stars. That's important. I'm a star among many stars. And the light from each star is important so that people see the magnitude of the universe, right? We don't just see one star out there shining. There are millions and billions of stars, right? And so what am I saying? What do I mean by all of this? I'm saying it's important that we shine together. I can't shine by myself without my brothers and sisters.
True indeed.
See, we got to shine together. And so that mindset, us, we, They say that's the shortest poem. The shortest poem is us, we. That's it.
True indeed. Yo, G, so earlier on, you talked a little bit about um, growing up with knowledge of self, being
Mhm,
incarcerated temporarily. You
mhm,
talked about having your GED, but then you also mentioned the fact that you're pursuing a law degree, right? And to
mhm,
me, you know, I would like to see somewhere down the line, you may think you probably need more gray hair first, but to write your story,
mhm, mhm,
because that in itself is very inspirational to a lot of people,
mhm,
because you have a lot of people who grow up disenfranchised, or they grow up and they go through various different ciphers
mhm.
where they may not make that transition to say, I'm going to go from here
Yeah.
to pursue an actual law degree,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And I seen the images and stuff, and I built with you along your journey when you were in DC. So what has that journey been like? That from an author and then saying, you know what, I need to pursue this law degree. Why that particular path?
Well, for one, it has been an enriching, empowering experience, both academically, personally. It has been definitely rewarding. Um, so I'll try to answer your question in two parts. The first, just looking at things from an academic point, you know that Allah, one of his teachings, uh, one of the most fundamental teachings, was that we should go out and get an education. We should go out and get skills, not to work for other people, but to work for ourselves,
Hmm.
right? With it starts with our own growth and development, so that we can come back and build a nation that we see that we want to have. It's not to go out and build other people's nations and other said nations, and to help further the agenda of the oppressor. We don't go out and get skilled education. Now, some people, they ain't figured that out yet, but I figured out early on the purpose of going out to get an education. And so one of the things for me is that I wanted to understand power. So when I went to college, I knew that I would eventually go to law school. This was the same aspiration that Malcolm X had before a teacher stuck a pin in his head and told him that he wouldn't be trusted. So that's how much of a powerful impact the autobiography of Malcolm X had on me, as I read the book several times and took notes. Right? Malcolm wanted to be an attorney. Right? Some people even say that even Dr. Martin Luther King wanted to become an attorney at one time too, but he eventually became a preacher. Right? And so for me, interesting thing about me is that my interest in law began while I was incarcerated, because I went into the law library and started to research my case. I wanted to, I had this time and I felt like there was an injustice, there was a miscarriage of justice in the handling of my case. And so I went into the law library to seek out answers.
Mm.
As with anything else, like with knowledge of self, and when you are embarking on something like becoming an attorney, you are someone who wants to seek answers, or at least want to develop the skill on knowing how to, having the skill to find answers. And that's the type of person, it's who I am personally. I'm someone who wants to seek out answers. And so my interest in the law started out with me in the law library in prison, in law library doing legal research. And then it went from that to a librarian at the time who said, listen, you're in here so much, you might as well take the legal research course. And
Mm.
so I went and took that legal research course, and I scored the highest in my class. And
Mm.
so that ultimately enabled me to become a law clerk, or what some people would call a jailhouse lawyer. And I would go to work every day in the prison, in the law library, and I would help different brothers with their cases. I would help them get answers to their cases. And if they have a something that was factually or legally in dispute, I would help them research the law and help them appeal their case to the next level of authority, so that they can rectify whatever the problem is with their individual case. And I just grew a natural affinity for it. I became passionate about it because I was, for a chance now I found another way to help people. And that's the type of person that I am, right? I wanted to be the person that I'm gonna help fix your problem for you. First, let's talk about your problem. Let's talk about how we got there, and then after we unpack that problem, now let's get to a solution. Let's figure out together how we're gonna solve this thing and how we're gonna rectify it and make it right. How are we gonna right the wrong? Again, we're going back to that righteous principle again, that ethical and moral concept of righteousness, which is also the act of righting a wrong.
True indeed.
Right.
Now,
So
in that process, G,
right.
did you get involved with any legal cases as it relates to our nation of the 5%?
Definitely. And let me say, it started out with a landmark case in 2004 called Maria versus Broadus. Maria versus Broadus was a federal case in New York that involved the God Intelligent Tarifa law. And there were many more cases before that landmark case where you had different brothers, gods who were incarcerated, who were being told that there was a ban on their culture, that they did not have the freedom to practice this way of life while they were incarcerated, while they were doing their time. But other said nations, right? Other brothers were allowed to be Muslim. They were allowed to be Christian. They were allowed to be Moors. They were allowed to be, have Native American beliefs and even Rosicrucians. They were allowed to practice their faith. Jews were allowed to practice their faith, and they were locked up like us. And we saw that as a fundamental wrong, because we're looking at it like, well, whatever happened to equal protection under the law? So as this question rose, a lot of gods began to initiate litigation. They began filing lawsuits against the prisons that they were being kept in for not being allowed to practice their culture. And then there was this unjust universal ban on the culture because someone decided to group us with gangs unjustly and unfairly without facts. But it was done out of fear. It was done out of fear because they thought that somehow gods would take over the prisons. And, there was a case, man, in Virginia involving the god Lord Versatile, man. And I got on the stand and I explained to the assistant attorney general that had the case that we're not trying to take over the prisons. Our teachings are transformational. Our teachings help rehabilitate. Our teachings help gangsters become righteous men. Our teachings help people who didn't have family values start to honor and embrace being fathers and coming home and participating in being a family member. Our teachings help people return to society as productive citizens to make positive contributions to their communities, having learned from the mistakes of their past. Why would you want to deny something like that to the people who need it the most, which are people who are incarcerated? So these questions came up, and so Intelligent Tarif defended the culture beautifully. And brothers such as Born Justice, Lord Born Justice, and Sia Kill, rest in peace, participated in testifying at the God's trial where our culture was being tested. And them gods had to show and prove the righteousness of our teachings to the court using their language and their rules to show and prove that our teachings are right and exact and that they warrant the authorization for us to practice that. We weren't asking for permission. We were saying that, listen, our way, a natural way of life should not be banned at all. It should have never been banned. And that's why we went to court. And the guards got on their truth or square, and they showed and proved that. They learned the language of the law, educated themselves about their rights, and successfully put forth litigation in federal court to defend their rights. And so that became a victory for us, which is, again, today's supreme alphabet. But that became a victory for us in court with Intelligent Tariq in 2004. Now, during this time, I was incarcerated and I was working in the law library, and I was blessed to be around some very powerful guards who taught me how to examine Intelligent Tariq case and how to examine the laws upon which that case was decided. And when I took it through my studies and I looked around and I said, well, wait a minute, if we won, how come we still not allowed to congregate? How come we still not allowed to have crowns? How come we still not allowed to have these lessons in prison? They were still banning it, even though we won a lawsuit. So that became a 4-year process from 2004 to 2008. That's when I filed my lawsuit, which, of course, can be looked at. People can, pull it up, Panayoti versus Anucci, who was the person who ran Department of Corrections in New York State at the time. He was their counsel, the attorney for the Department of Corrections, and I filed a lawsuit against him because when I was advocating on behalf of our culture, I wrote to him and told him, listen, we need to have our classes. We need to be able to practice our way of life because it is important for us, for our own rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. Right? We in the process, man, of using these teachings, man, to improve ourselves so that we can come home right and exact. Mm-hmm. He wrote me back and told me, listen, Mr. Starmel, there will be no congregate activity. There will be no lessons. There will be no celebrating of honor days. There will be no outside visitors coming in without a court order. So naturally, I ultimately, once, having gotten the last word from him, there was nothing else to do but to go to court because we've exhausted all of the administrative remedies. There was nobody else to write to appeal to on an administrative level. And so we had to go outside that administration. Now, fortunately, a lot of people think that, if you locked up, you don't have any rights, but that's not true. You actually have many rights. And there's even cases that establish that just because you are behind a wall or behind a barbed wire fence does not mean that all your rights are gone. Mm-hmm. And having learned all of that, we put in the lawsuit, God, and the basis of that lawsuit was to highlight and to show the court that we are continuously being denied basic things that are being afforded to other people. Mm-hmm. Christians were allowed to congregate and come together and have their Bibles and have their religious paraphernalia and regalia. We weren't allowed. Muslims were allowed. Even the closest thing to us, which is some of the Nation of Islam brothers, were allowed to have classes. And, many guards at the time were coming up under the umbrella of the Nation of Islam in prisons because that was the only thing that was allowed. So brothers would sign up for Muslim services or Nation of Islam classes, and the guards would meet there to build. Dang. My lawsuit put an end to all of that. My lawsuit, with the help of many guards, not just me, myself, but I initiated it. But, we were able to get other brothers to join that lawsuit in. And one of those brothers was Universal, very instrumental, right? He added on to it, and we were able to get brothers such as Allah Shah and other brothers from the Free Cipher like Born Black and Allah You Justice, and a lot of brothers to write declarations that would be used to support the argument that we are a legitimate entity. Mm-hmm. And that we have a 501c3, we have our own newspaper. We're not. How can we be a gang and have all of that? Exactly. Gangs don't have newspapers and 501c3s. Exactly. And so really, it was just a matter of knowing the language to be able to show and prove to the court, to a federal judge, that we are right and exact, and that the Department of Corrections had no legitimate basis to ban our culture. And we won that in many states, including Massachusetts, Connecticut, Virginia, New York, Massachusetts, and a host of other places. If people go out and do the research on litigation that has taken place in the last, I would say, 20 or so years, 25 years, involving lawsuits involving Gaza nerves, and some are still ongoing because it's done on a state-by-state basis. It's regional. We have not yet won for example, a case in the United States Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the land. And I think if we would ultimately win that, that would put an end to a lot of the discrimination that takes place in some of these small towns and other states where litigation has not reached the federal level yet, right? Yeah. So my that advocacy allowed me the opportunity to take what I've learned as a law clerk and as a God, to put it together and show and prove that to a judge, right? And so in 2013, yeah, go ahead, God.
Pardon me for 1 second, G.
Yep.
Okay, pardon me, G. My 2-year-old over here turning water on now.
Oh wow, yeah. She's exploring. That's what they do. They explore. They're gonna explore everything. Yep. So, but yeah, God, just to kind of bring things into perspective. There's a saying that sometimes shit happens for other shit to happen. Lawsuits became necessary because we studied, we prepared ourselves. Our supreme mathematics and alphabets prepared us. Our 120 lessons prepared us for the test. Surely we should not assume that we will be 5%ers and not be tested. Right? And so those degrees prepared us to be able to go out and show and prove who we are in all walks of life, in all settings, as we say, Allah is Lord of all the worlds. Now, some people take that to mean, I remember when because I used to read a lot of comic books, God. So when I heard Allah is Lord of all the worlds, the first thing I thought was Marvel Universe. I'm still thinking mystery God, Galactus. So I'm thinking like some kind of, supreme being in control of all the worlds. But I had to come down to earth and really look at it for what's going on here. And so on earth, on this planet, there are many different worlds. That's how I see that. When we say Allah is Lord of all the worlds, that doesn't mean that we just God of our lessons. You can't just limit yourself to being the God of 120 lessons and that's it. That means you God of mathematics, God of science, gods of plants and herbs and spices and food, nutrition, literature, writing, architecture, engineering, all of these things. We're supposed to be the God of that. We're supposed to be the Lord of all those worlds, even law.
True indeed.
Right? We're supposed to be God of our families. God of medicine. We're supposed to know the science of medicines, what medicines to take, what not to take. So being Lord of all the worlds, that is, I see that as a down to earth application of how we're supposed to be mastering and be the Lord and master of all of these different sciences. So that through that, this is how we teach people the difference between right or wrong, which way to go, left or right. right? Because we know our people are easily led in the wrong direction. So if you're not the Lord of a certain world and you're coming to try to teach somebody that what they're doing is they're going in the wrong direction or they're easily led in the wrong direction, it's going to be kind of hard to prove that to that person if you're not the Lord of that world.
Sure
Because
indeed.
they will always challenge you and test you. Remember, we learned from what Jesus went through that he was tested and they wanted him to show and prove that he was the Son of God. Well, we're going to be tested because other people are going to want us to show and prove that we the sons of Allah, that we the sons and daughters of Allah, right? They're going to, what makes you, you know, you get into a discussion about, I'm just going to pull something out off the top of my head and just talk about toothpaste, brushing our teeth, right? If we're not informed about what is the appropriate type of toothpaste to use, and we try to go out and teach somebody something, they say, well, you know, Colgate is the best toothpaste. Or they may say AIM is the best toothpaste, right? Or they may say Crest is the best toothpaste. And here comes a 5%er joining that discussion and says, none of those are the right toothpaste. None of them. And now we have to explain why. And why is in our supreme alphabet. It's a question asked mostly by those seeking understanding or those who are 85% seeking to understand why you say what you say. Why should I believe you? Why should I stop eating McDonald's? Why should I stop eating or using this particular food or drinking this drink? Why should I stop eating pork? Why should I read more books? Why should I stop using this toothpaste? And so it becomes incumbent on us to be informed enough to be able to explain why, not only from a scientific point of view, but we have to incorporate the art form of teaching now. And that sort of brings it all back. We had to do the same thing in court. So it's important that we learn how to teach one another, you know what I mean? Because really it's just, people are easily led in the wrong direction because of their beliefs, because of certain beliefs that they incorporate. People are easily led in the wrong direction because they're not informed. So one of the most important jobs of teaching people is being able to have the necessary information to share with people without getting belligerent, right? Without showing them a side. And this is how you show your equality, by being able to teach effectively, and people will get the understanding. They will get that, right? And I digress a lot. I digress a little bit. I want to just come back a little bit because, again, this is what I had in mind with the righteous way, and I took certain measures to explain certain things throughout various chapters in the Righteous Way book, part 1, part 2, and part 3. Very important. There's a lot of things that I address in there. Too much to name now, but it's important that I show through my writing how to explain things to people. And I found that that's how you can be the most effective 5%er you can be, is when you are well informed and you are well rounded and you are able to explain to people with compassion right from wrong. Right? Because one of the most difficult things is not teaching somebody the truth. One of the most difficult things is teaching somebody that what they believe is wrong.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's very hard to do because, you know, we hold on to these core beliefs, right? Our parents, and so even in our generation, right, they hold on to these beliefs, and these beliefs are almost unshakable because the 10%, or as our lessons say, the devil continues daily, every day. They don't take no breaks. They don't take no retirement from being the devil. So if the devil doesn't retire, if the devil doesn't take any breaks and fall back and take vacations from being the devil, why should God do it? Why should God think that this is something that you take a break from? We have to teach every day. And that goes again back to the the enlightener. Each and every day and each and every way, I'm going to show and prove and teach the righteous way. That was the inspiration for the title of the book. That was the inspiration. And so it's an everyday thing. You know, you can't give up on yourself. You can't try to save yourself on Monday and give up on Wednesday because it's too hard, or because you're distracted, or you know you didn't have time to work on yourself because you were on your timeline, or you were doing this or you were doing that. So interestingly, remember I said earlier, sometimes shit got to happen for other shit to happen. Now look at what happened as a result of this pandemic. It forced people to stay at home, and it forced people to check their health and be more concerned about health and well-being, because so many people's relatives or family, friends, close ones, loved ones have returned to the essence. And a lot of this hit home for a lot of people. And that put us in a position where now we have to start taking charge of our own health. We can no longer rely on the system to be in charge of our health. We have to take charge of it. And so that's why you see more and more people now sharing things like, yo, sea moss, ginger, honey, lime, you know, turmeric, eating the right foods, leaving the processed foods alone. Man, 5%ers were teaching this thing for a long time, and nobody was listening.
True indeed.
Most people just gave up pork and kept doing everything else.
True indeed.
But
the same thing, G, with like homeschooling. Or, you know, now we see a lot of women who are trending in terms of being doulas and midwives now, when that's something that's been customary and traditional to our people for generations. You know, additionally, I love seeing a lot of people enterprising now, becoming entrepreneurs and creating their own business.
That's right.
With healthcare products.
Right.
Different type of clothing brands or textiles that they're doing. I think this has also forced people to really look within in terms of finding their own creative space and creating something that's a contribution to this world, which they can trade amongst other people and make a way for themselves and not dependent upon big government or somebody else outside of them to take care of themselves.
Facts, God. Yeah, definitely. You know, and again, this goes back to that whole vibe, you know, of relying on self, depending on self, coming into our own, and realizing that we can't rely on anyone, that we have to save ourselves. And that shit had to happen for this shit to happen, where we are now looking into ourselves and saying, yo, what can I do? I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to start my own business, right? I'm going to take charge of my health. I'm going to cook my own food. I'm going to stop buying fast food. I'm going to stop going out to eat. This thing forced this whole situation to happen. And it also forced people to be at home with family members that they wouldn't otherwise be with, because they would be spending that time at work. And now people are working from home. So the more time you spend home, that puts you in a homebody state of mind for you to undergo homeostasis. You know, people are going to undergo these changes mentally, emotionally, physically. More and more people are, you know, going to start trying to work out, get their health back. And it's important that people out there that are not 5%ers pick up on this vibe, man. I got to say that, because the gods of the earth, listen, we know the science. We know the science. So I'm not going to manifest this here for people that already know the science. This is for the people out there that don't know the science. Y'all need to tune in to yourselves, tap in to your power, and pick up on the vibe. There's a saying that sometimes we deal with too much emotions. We deal with emotions, but we don't know how to feel. That might go over some people's head. Right? We have brains and we have thoughts, but we don't know how to think. Picking up on the vibe is important. Everything in the universe is a vibration. And again, time moves in cycles. So if you're not in tune with this cycle, if you're not in tune with what's happening, you're gonna be out of whack. Your whole vibe and how you move, your wisdom is gonna be out of season. Nobody's gonna be receiving you well. And you wondering, it's gonna feel like the universe is against you, but really what's happening is that you're against the universe. Because you're not in tune with yourself. And that shows and proves that there is a direct relationship between us and the universe. We are a product of the universe. And in this universe, there is masculine and feminine energy. We need to tap into the energy. We need to tap into ourselves. Most of us know what we're saying is right and exact, especially for those people out there that are not 5%ers. I want to put emphasis on that because there's a lot of people out there that they might consider themselves spiritual, cultural, but their conscience, they're aware. Some people might even refer to themselves as woke, but they're not fully woke. They're not really picking up on that vibe yet. They're almost there. They're at the cusp of it. But the more in tune they get with themselves and start looking into themselves as that power source, they're going to see their own divinity. They're going to see their own power. They're going to see their own ability to create a world for themselves that is not dependent on sitting up at home and waiting for a mystery god to bring them food, clothing, and shelter.
True indeed.
You know?
Yeah. Yo, God, so I appreciate you taking your time to build with us and share,
Appreciate
part of
that,
your journey, as well as, your insights in terms of why you even wrote this book. For those of you who want to pick up the book, I put it in the chat and then you can see it on the screen right here. Just go to therighteouswaybook.com and you can get the entire trilogy there, book 1, 2, and 3. Definitely support him. And like I said, those of you who really want to get a sense of what our culture is, it's the best introductory book to teach you and give you a righteous introduction to what our culture is all about.
Definitely.
I definitely want to have you back on again, G, because I know you just, what was that, the LSAT that you just took recently?
Yes. I'm waiting for my score now. I think the scores come out February 3rd. So I'm patiently waiting on that and working on other areas of my law school application while waiting on the LSAT score to be released. And so that's a job in and of itself. A lot of people don't know this, but I'm still in the legal world. I graduated from City College of New York with my bachelor's in political science. I graduated with honors, magna cum laude. I was a part of a very special elite class of legal scholars under the Skadden Arps Honors Program. I was also a participant of the and a member of the Colin Powell School for Civic and Global Leadership. And so that afforded me an opportunity. That's what actually ultimately led me to interning in Washington, D.C. And gaining that experience there. I met a lot of great people, a lot of great leaders. I had the pleasure of meeting good old Joe Biden and brothers such as Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of Brooklyn and Queens, representative, member of the House, very outspoken brother, very hardworking brother, man, and he's really for the people. And I've been fortunate enough to get an inside perspective and experience of understanding how the government works. And that's very important, right? We need to understand how not only the government, but other systems We need to understand this is, I'm actually echoing something that firstborn ABG taught. And I was at the law school in Mecca where ABG explained that it's very necessary for us to understand not only how the government works, but how all these systems work so that we can make better decisions on how we're going to govern ourselves. Very, very important. I know a lot of people, made some strides to institute, things for us to be a part of and organize. But in order for us to really be successful in those overtakings, is that we have to qualify ourselves. That's the whole purpose of knowledge itself, is to go through a qualification process so that you can choose yourself. And I know there's some people out there watching this saying, man, I want to learn more about this. I want to choose myself, but they don't know how to ask. They don't know who to go to. Reach out. Reach out. There's people out there, man, that listen, if you sincerely want to learn this thing, there's people out there that will help you along the way and guide you in the right direction to learn what it is that you need to learn at the level that you're at in life. And that's an important thing about knowledge itself, is that it teaches you where you are in life now and where you could be if you just tap in to your infinite potential.
True indeed, God. So I appreciate it again, God. When we could coordinate our schedules again, we definitely got to do this and add on again.
I'll be more than happy to, God.
I'm proud of everything that you're doing. Every time I see your updates and when we build with each other, you let me know what you're doing. I'm thankful that you're there because, light work is done that way with many hands.
Definitely.
Hold on for a second. Okay. So yeah, God, let me get this baby ready for rest.
Definitely. If I could just leave the viewers out there with one thing in mind, just take this. If you don't take nothing away from this, take this one thing. Take this one thing, man. Listen, one hand washes the other, both wash the face. Meditate on that.
Stop. Okay, God, I'm gonna build with you again. I love you and
definitely,
keep up the excellent work, G.
Likewise. Peace, God.
Say peace, God.
Peace, Queen. Peace to the gods and earths.
All right. Peace, Almighty.
Peace.